In one panoramic view, I can give you the history of Kodiak, Alaska. I'm on board the Tustumena right now on my way to Homer, but still at dock in Kodiak. And I'm impressed to see that really just in this piece of land in front of me, I can tell you 200 years of Kodiak history. To begin with, I'm going to show the entire panorama. There is the Star of Kodiak. There we have the Kodiak National Wildlife Refuge and Visitor Center. You can see the white gabled roof of the Baranov Museum. There's the Russian Orthodox Church, and behind that is the Baptist Church. And there we have Petromarine Services fuel tanks. If this was to be a chronological tour, we would start here at the Russian American Company's magazine, the fur store. It was in 1808 that the Russian American Company constructed this magazine or warehouse. It was used to store goods that were used by the Russian American Company and procured by the Alutiiq people. The Russians came to Kodiak and established the town of Kodiak in 1792 as Pavlovsky Gavan, or St. Paul Harbor. This is the oldest building in Alaska. It's the oldest log structure on the west coast of the United States, and it now operates as the Baranov Museum, full of fascinating history about Kodiak, including excellent artifacts related to the Russian period of Kodiak's history. To the right, you see the Russian Orthodox Church. It's the Holy Resurrection Cathedral. This is the home of Orthodoxy in the Americas. It was in 1794 that the first Russian Orthodox mission came to Kodiak. They came at the behest of the Russian American Company to really proselytize and spread Christianity to the Alutiiq people of Kodiak. They also protest the abuses of the Russian American Company against the native people. St. Herman was one of the initial founders of the Kodiak mission, and he was one of the primary advocates for the Alutiiq. He's also a major saint and one of several saints that are actually from Kodiak within the Russian Orthodox faith. Kind of chronologically moving through time, you take a look at those fuel tanks right there. Not very interesting or historical, you'd think. However, that became purchased by Standard Oil Company following the Russian Revolution. You see, in 1867, the U.S. purchased Alaska from Russia. However, the Russian Empire continued to fund the Russian Orthodox missions and the churches in Alaska. All of this ended at the beginning of the Russian Revolution. At that time, the church could no longer afford to keep its land because it owed money to the storekeeper, W.J. Erskine, who at the time was living in that house there, back at the Baranov Museum building. And so they had to sell some of their assets in order to pay for their debts, and that included the land that now is where the Petromarine Service building is. So surprisingly, those fuel tanks over there are a portion of the Russian Revolution in Kodiak. Moving back, here we have this Liberty ship, the Star of Kodiak. This is one of hundreds and hundreds of Liberty ships that were built during World War II to transport goods and people across the oceans and to serve the war effort. However, it came to Kodiak following 1964 when the earthquake and tsunami, the Great Alaskan Earthquake, devastated downtown Kodiak. And they needed to quickly create and have processing capacity because Kodiak is a major seafood port. As a result, they brought in this vessel. The Star of Kodiak is what they called it. It was the Alaska Packers Association that owned it at the time. And they brought up this Liberty ship and started processing crab as soon as they could following the '64 earthquake. And so while this is a remnant of World War II history in the US, locally it is one of the visible remnants from the '64 earthquake and tsunami. World War II absolutely transformed Kodiak. Tens of thousands of servicemen came here during the war in order to, first of all, construct the naval base, which is now the Coast Guard base, and then in order to defend Alaska's coastline. Kodiak was the head of the Aleutian campaign until Attu and Kiska were retaken by the Americans. Many people don't know that the Japanese actually occupied America's shore, that is, in Alaska, during the time. So the National Wildlife Refuge is actually a legacy of the war. It was in 1941 that Franklin Delano Roosevelt, the president, created Kodiak National Wildlife Refuge. And this was partially due to the desires of the servicemen who were here. They wanted to create a permanent safe habitat for the Kodiak bears. You'll see that there's a statue of a bear in front of the National Wildlife Refuge Visitor Center there. That is in commemoration of one of the bear guides, Charles Madsen, who came to Kodiak at the early 1900s and started to really market Kodiak as a worldwide destination for sports hunters. So there you have it, in this one simple landscape, from the history of seafood processing and the military history and the history of the '64 earthquake, to the history of conservation. Up behind there we have the Baranov Museum looking at Russian American history, and there we have the Russian Orthodox Church and the fuel tanks showing you these kind of longer lasting legacies of the Russian period.